Conspiracy claims spread fast. They promise simple answers. They reject evidence, but science tests every idea. It measures, it questions, it repeats. And when the results are clear, the truth stays. Today we look at the biggest conspiracy claims, and we see what the evidence really shows. This is Science versus Conspiracy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to the deep dive. We have a really fascinating, and I have to say, a pretty sobering stack of sources today. They take us right into, well, the heart of what you could call modern skepticism. Our mission is to go beyond the truth, to look at the mechanics of conspiracy theories, where they come from, how they spread so fast now, and I think most importantly, the psychology behind it all, this deep distrust.
It's such a crucial subject because what our sources throw at us right away is this profound crisis in how we even understand reality. We're starting from a, frankly, chilling idea.
Sure.
The power of visual evidence of a picture, of a video, is fundamentally broken.
Wow. Okay, that is a huge claim right out of gate. For, what, centuries? The photograph, the image, that was the ultimate proof, right? Seeing is believing. What's changed so much?
Well, we've basically entered an era where making really, really big, sophisticated fakes isn't just for Hollywood studios or, government agencies anymore. It's everywhere.
It's democratized.
It's completely democratized. The source material really hammers this point. You can manipulate images and video on a regular cell phone until the real thing and the fake thing look exactly the same. We're talking deep fakes, AI-generated images, even just high-quality Photoshop. It's accessible to everyone now.
So when someone demands, show me the proof, and you show them a photo, that photo itself is no longer proof. They could just say, well, that could be edited.
Precisely. The implication is massive. The evidential power of the image is, as one source puts it, shot. Once you can't trust what you see, once you accept that any visual can be manufactured, the door just swings wide open for doubt about everything else.
Right, regardless of the source.
It shifts the entire burden of proof.
And what's really interesting, our sources argue that for a lot of these narratives, whether it's about the shape of the Earth or, the origins of a global health crisis, the actual subject doesn't even matter that much.
Not really. The goal is way more political, more psychological than it is, say, cosmological or biological. The sources define these theories again and again, not as a genuine search for knowledge, but as pure destabilization measures.
Destabilization, what does that mean in this context?
It means the aim is to corrode the very foundation of a shared reality. If you can get people to doubt the official version, doubt the institutions doing the research, doubt the media reporting on it, then you completely fracture society's ability to agree on facts and act together.
You're basically weaponizing healthy skepticism, which is what we need to figure out today. Where is that line between the kind of skepticism that drives science and critical thinking and this other thing, this destructive denial that's often, engineered?
That's the core tension.
Let's start with maybe the most iconic and enduring example of this kind of reality bending.
When you talk about engineering doubt about something the whole world saw, you have to start with the biggest media spectacle of the 20th century.
The Apollo 11 moon landing. July 16, 1969. I mean, an event that defined a generation. And yet, decades later, the idea that it was all just a perfect staging, a hoax filmed in a studio somewhere, that idea is still stubbornly alive.
And you have to put it in its geopolitical context to understand why. This was the Cold War. It was the absolute height of the Soviet-American space race, and that race was all about ideological superiority.
It wasn't just science.
Oh, not at all. Getting to the moon first was a military and propaganda victory. It was designed to show the world who was the top dog in tech, in power, in everything. So when 600 million people watched Neil Armstrong take those first steps, that was meant to be the ultimate show of force.
And here's the irony, right? The very thing that makes it seem like a perfect setup for a conspiracy the U.S. wanting to show off is actually the strongest argument against it being a fake.
That's the essential counterpoint our research brings up. Think about it. If that whole event was faked, if they just rolled out a rover on a soundstage in Nevada, who would have known instantly?
The
Soviet Union. They had the satellites, the radar, the eavesdropping capabilities, but more importantly, they had the absolute existential motivation to expose it. They would have used every single resource they had to stand up and denounce America for lying to the world.
But they didn't. All we got was silence, or maybe some begrudging acknowledgement that the Americans got there first.
Exactly. And in that context, their silence is almost a form of verification. But it doesn't matter. For millions of people, it's still a fiction. And the root of that denial, like we said at the start, is this deep distrust. It's fueled by the gap between this monumental thing that happened and their own everyday experience. They couldn't see it with their own eyes.
And that psychological need for immediate personal proof that takes us from the geopolitical drama of the moon to the very shape of the planet we live on.
To the flat earthers.
The geometry of denial in its purest form.
It really is. I mean, we are talking about thousands of people who genuinely believe the spherical shape of the Earth is this huge, elaborate lie that's been maintained for centuries by NASA and every government in the world.
And the irony of their whole community is just, it's almost hard to believe.
Well, what really stands out in the sources is the logistical absurdity of it all. These believers, these flat earthers, they hold international conferences. The source material mentions one in Amsterdam.
Okay.
So just think about that for a second. They traveled, hundreds or thousands of miles to all meet at one specific point on what they claim is an infinite flat plane. And I can guarantee you they used GPS or Google Maps or some kind of satellite navigation to get there.
Systems that only work because the Earth is a sphere.
Exactly. They use the very geometry they deny to gather together and deny it even more. It's incredible.
But, okay, they must have some way to account for basic physics, right? Like gravity. If the Earth isn't a giant ball pulling us down, how does gravity work in their model?
Oh, they've developed a whole alternative physics. It's actually fascinating in how it tries to explain things. They replace gravity with something they call universal acceleration.
Universal acceleration.
Yeah. Their model says it's not the apple falling down to the Earth. It's the entire disk of the Earth constantly moving upwards, accelerating at 9.8 meters per second squared.
Wow.
And that constant upward push is what creates the feeling of weight, what we call gravity.
So the Earth isn't spinning. It's not orbiting the sun. It's just a disk flying upwards through space forever.
Correct. Which means they have to rewrite all of cosmology, too.
Yeah.
In their model, the sun and the moon are much smaller, much closer. They circle above the disk of the Earth like giant flashlights, basically.
Shining down on different parts of the disk to make day and night.
You got it.
And the classic question, of course, if it's a disk, what stops you from just sailing a boat right off the edge?
The ice wall. They believe the entire edge of the planet is protected by a massive, impassable wall of ice.
Which is Antarctica.
That's what they say it is. The South Pole. It's there to hold in the oceans and stop people from falling off. And of course, this requires a huge global conspiracy of every government and military to patrol this ice wall 24/7 to keep it a secret.
And sometimes this belief system moves out of the abstract world of online forums and into the real world with tragic results. Which brings us to Mad Mike Hughes.
This is such a devastating real-world story, a case of conviction taken to its absolute fatal extreme. Mad Mike Hughes was an American daredevil, and he was so determined to prove the flat Earth theory that he poured his whole life into building his own rocket.
His logic was simple, right?
Yeah.
If he could just get high enough, he'd see the flat disk with his own two eyes and expose the whole conspiracy.
Yeah, the altitude you need to really see the curvature clearly is about 30 kilometers. Mike's first launch, he used a steam-powered rocket. It only got him about 500 meters up.
Not nearly enough.
No, he crashed, he landed hard, hurt his back pretty badly, but he actually saw it as a success because it got him a ton of publicity for the cause.
But he didn't stop. The obsession continued.
It did, and his final attempt was fatal. His parachute failed to deploy properly right after launch. He literally died trying to physically prove this fixed idea that contradicted everything we know about physics.
He manufactured his own demise to try and disprove reality.
Exactly.
And the brutal irony, as the sources point out, is that you don't need a steam-powered rocket to prove the Earth's curvature. You don't need a billion-dollar space program. You just need a few simple things.
A boat, a lake, and a laser.
It's the elegance of the scientific method. Explain how this works.
It's really simple. A laser beam, over that kind of distance, travels in a perfectly straight horizontal line. So if you're a flat earther, your hypothesis would be, if the Earth is flat, a laser aimed at a boat far away on a still lake should always hit the boat at the exact same spot, right? The same height above the water, no matter how far away it is.
Okay, that makes sense. But what does the experiment actually show?
It shows the exact opposite. As the boat moves further away from the laser, the beam hits the hull progressively higher up. The only way that can happen is if the surface of the lake itself is curving away from the straight line of the laser.
So the water is tilting downwards, so to speak, because it's on a sphere?
It's demonstrably a sphere. The data proves the curvature.
So if the evidence is that simple, that repeatable, from the Soviets being quiet about the moon landing to a laser on a lake, why the denial? And this is where we get into the psychology, right? It's not about the facts anymore.
It's not about the facts. It's about who you believe is giving you the facts. The source of the information becomes the target. And once that core trust is broken, no amount of evidence, not a laser, not a satellite photo, not the consensus of 77 of the world's top scientists, none of it will get through. The belief is rooted in suspicion, not evidence.
Okay, let's talk about that suspicion, because it really is the engine for this whole phenomenon. Our sources say the core worldview of a conspiracy theorist is just. It's shaped by intense distrust. They see secret plots everywhere.
And their guiding philosophy is that everything is connected. Alles hängt mit allem zusammen, as one German source puts it. They're constantly hunting for patterns, for links, and they often believe they're the only ones smart enough to see the hidden web.
And if all the threads lead back to one point, someone must be pulling the strings.
There must be a puppet master, this all-powerful, shadowy group they always call the elite.
Right.
Whether it's globalists, secret societies, whatever. This elite is always at the top, pulling the strings, using their power for evil, controlling everything. It's a very simple but very powerful worldview.
But here's the really tricky part that our sources bring up, and it's a necessary one. History shows that, well, a little bit of distrust is occasionally a very good thing. I mean, if we didn't have skepticism, we wouldn't have investigative journalism.
This is the vital point. This is what gives the whole movement its psychological power. Because every single time a government is caught in a lie, every time a big corporation covers up a disaster, that trust in institutions erodes a little more. It creates a historical record that shows people in power do sometimes conspire.
And that fuels the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
And we have such a powerful, dark case study for this. The story of Frank Olson in the CIA experiments back in 1953.
Yeah.
This isn't a theory. This is a verified, true conspiracy.
It's the perfect example of what happens when a state agency operates completely outside the law. Frank Olson was, by all accounts, a family man, a brilliant biochemist at the U.S. Army's Camp Detrick. But he had a secret. He was also a CIA agent working on some really disturbing biological warfare program.
And his death was just written off.
Very quickly. The official story was a regrettable suicide. He fell from a 10th floor hotel room in New York after, they said, 9 days of severe depression. And that official story held up for decades, hiding this huge institutional betrayal.
We have to get into two specific operations that show why Olson's story is so damaging to public trust. The first is Operation Sea Spray from 1950.
Yeah, Operation Sea Spray. Olson's team planned this. The U.S. Navy sprayed a type of bacteria off the coast of San Francisco. The bacteria was supposed to be harmless, but it was traceable. The whole point was to see how quickly a real biological weapon could spread across a major city.
So they were running a simulation on an unsuspecting public.
An unwitting public. And the test worked in a sense. The bacteria was detected all over the city, but while the CIA claimed it was harmless, that wasn't true. It made a lot of people sick, and at least one patient died as a result.
And nobody knew.
Nobody knew. It took journalists 20 years, 2 decades, to uncover the truth that the U.S. Navy had experimented on and accidentally poisoned its own citizens.
That is a staggering betrayal. And the second part of this story involves the drug test that led right up to Olson's death.
This was the CIA's research into mind control, specifically using LSD. They wanted to weaponize it, to make enemies Willis, totally compliant. And to test its effects, they ran illegal human experiments, secretly dosing people. Frank Olson himself was given LSD without his knowledge or consent right before that steep psychological decline that led to his death.
So those things, spraying citizens with bacteria, secretly dosing your own agents with powerful drugs, covering up a death, these are the exact kinds of confirmed historical secrets that completely shatter the foundation of institutional trust.
Absolutely. They create the fertile ground where people can say, well, if the CIA did that in the 50s, imagine what they're capable of doing today. And that little kernel of verified truth, that's what the huge pile of nonsense gets built around.
And the chemtrails narrative is the perfect modern conspiracy that builds directly on the paranoia that something like Operation Sea Spray creates. The idea of secret government spraying programs is right there.
It connects perfectly. Chemtrail believers, they look up at the sky, they see the persistent condensation trails from planes, and they interpret that as proof. Proof that governments, secret services, airlines are all in on a conspiracy to spray chemicals on the population.
And the suspected motives are all over the place. They think it's to cause climate change, or to fight climate change, or to manipulate the weather, or just to make people sick for population control.
And once that belief takes hold, the sources say, the person gets this profound sense of mission. They have to wake up the sheeple, right? They have to share their findings with the world, and they do it primarily through social media.
Okay, before we get into the psychology of that community, we absolutely have to break down the hard science. Because the reality of condensation trails, it's just basic physics. It's not chemical warfare.
It's fundamental atmospheric science. When a plane is at cruising altitude, it's really, really cold up there, maybe minus 50 degrees Celsius. The engines are burning kerosene, and that combustion creates two main things: water vapor and tiny soot particles. So you have this super hot water vapor hitting the freezing cold, low-pressure air. It instantly condenses on those little soot particles and forms millions of tiny ice crystals. That's what we see. That's the trail.
So it's basically just a man-made high-altitude cloud. But why do some of them stick around for hours and stretch across the whole sky, while others disappear in seconds?
That is 100% dependent on the weather conditions up there. If the air is very humid and very cold, those ice crystals will last for a long, long time. But if the plane descends into warmer air, or if the air mass it's flying through is drier, the ice crystals just sublimate. They turn directly from solid back into vapor, and the trail vanishes. It's meteorology, not a conspiracy.
And the source material has some really fascinating testimony from people who would have to be in on this, right? The pilots.
Yes, an interview with a professional pilot, an aerobatics flyer, he confirms, yeah, for air shows they use paraffin-based smoke, which is biodegradable. But he states emphatically that using any kind of genuinely damaging chemical is, well, it's operationally impossible.
How so? Why?
He explains that it would destroy the plane. Introducing caustic chemicals into the fuel system would ruin the engine's turbine blades, it would corrode the fuel lines, it would eat through the tank walls. It makes absolutely no sense from a safety or a maintenance perspective. His conclusion from a lifetime of flying is simple: chemtrails don't exist.
And this isn't just one pilot's opinion. This is backed up by systematic, independent research.
Oh, absolutely. Major organizations like the German Aerospace Center, DLR, and NASA, they do this research all the time. They have dedicated projects where they fly specially equipped planes right into the condensation trails of other commercial jets to collect samples.
To see what's actually in there.
Exactly. They are specifically looking for anything unusual. And what they find is, well, nothing. They find only the substances you would expect to find in exhaust gases: carbon dioxide, water vapor, nitrogen oxides. Nothing strange, nothing toxic, no heavy metals.
In fact, there was a big international study done just on this topic.
Yes, and this study is key. They polled 77 of the world's most renowned atmospheric researchers. They asked them directly about the chemtrail theory. The result was overwhelming. 76 out of 77 said, based on all the available data, chemtrails do not exist. The one who didn't just said he couldn't explain some old measurements, but he didn't endorse the conspiracy. The scientific case is closed.
And yet the communities just keep growing, which suggests the belief is less about facts and more about the social and sometimes even cult-like structure that it provides.
You see these very clear social dynamics that mirror cult behavior. A lot of believers are people who are genuinely concerned about the world, maybe environmentalists, people worried about government overreach, and they're looking for answers, and this community gives them a complete, ready-made explanation for all the chaos.
And what happens when someone new joins one of these groups online?
They often experience what's called love bombing. They're showered with praise and attention. Welcome. You've finally woken up. You're smart enough to see the truth. It gives them this instant sense of belonging and, frankly, a sense of intellectual superiority.
But that acceptance is conditional.
Extremely. The second that person expresses any doubt, even slightly questions one of the group's core beliefs, that love bombing instantly flips to hate bombing. They get ridiculed, attacked, pushed out of the group. It creates this emotional protective bubble that is incredibly hard to penetrate with facts.
And behind that emotional bubble, we find the really ugly side of this, the profit motive, the scam.
It's a huge, unregulated industry built on fear, people selling all sorts of powders and remedies, healing crystals, you name it, all marketed as protection from the government's secret sprayings.
And the source gives a really stark example of this. the orgonite column.
Yeah, this thing is sold as the ultimate defense. You plant it in your garden, and it supposedly protects your home and your health from the chemtrails.
But when you look at the economics of it,
It's pure exploitation. The materials to build one copper pipes, metal shavings, quartz crystals, just stuff from a hardware store. It costs the seller less than 400 euros. But they sell these things online to scared believers for up to 3,600 euros.
that's a minimum 800% profit margin.
All based on manufactured fear. Someone is always making money when trust is destroyed.
To really get the patterns here, we have to see that this kind of exploitation, this fear-mongering for profit, it's not new. These mechanisms are centuries old.
They just repeat over and over again.
Let's go back to the downfall of the Templar Knights around 1307. This was a conspiracy theory, but it was orchestrated from the very top.
The official story, the accusations against the Templars were just sensational. Devil worship, heresy, secret orgies. King Philip the Friend positioned himself as the righteous hero who had to stop this evil plot.
And the climax was the mass arrest of all Templars in France on Friday, October 13, 1307, which is where that day gets its unlucky reputation.
Right. But the real motive was totally economic and political. The Templars had become incredibly wealthy and powerful. They were basically discreet international bankers. And crucially, King Philip himself owed them a huge amount of money.
So the king created a moral panic to get out of debt and seize their assets.
Exactly. The whole conspiracy narrative was just a cynical financial strategy. Philip himself spread the scary stories, the propaganda, and he was tapping into the natural distrust that common people already had for the super rich and powerful. He framed them as Satanists to justify taking all their stuff and wiping his debts clean.
And the aftermath is so telling. These power structures, they don't just disappear, they just rebrand.
Precisely. Even after the Pope officially banned the order, the Templars didn't just vanish. In places like Brandenburg, outside of the French king's direct control, they changed their cloaks. They continued operating as the Johannitors, the Order of St. John, the people, the land, the influence. It all stayed. Only the logo changed.
It just proves that sometimes these conspiracies are about consolidating control, not about eradication. You can see that scandal going viral on social media today.
It would explode. But that historical pattern takes us to the darkest, most destructive conspiracy model of all. The one that came out of the crisis of the plague in the Middle Ages, tied directly to anti-Semitism.
This was the ultimate invisible threat. People were dying horribly quickly, and no one knew why. It created this mass paranoia and this desperate human need to find a visible, local enemy to blame.
And the rumor that spread across Europe was simple and terrifyingly effective. The Jewish minority had poisoned the wells to cause the plague. This completely fabricated story provided a human scapegoat for an invisible biological disaster.
And the human cost was just staggering. It led to horrific, widespread pogroms and mass murder all over Europe based on a total fiction.
And it took centuries until the invention of the microscope to find the real cause. The Yersinia pestis bacterium spread by fleas on rats. This tiny, invisible organism wiped out maybe a third of the world's population, but for hundreds of years, people blamed a vulnerable minority instead of the actual pathogen.
And this leads to a really stark warning in our source material, that the umbrella of conspiracy theories throughout history and even today is so often anti-Semitism.
It's the consistent underlying pattern, often mixed with xenophobia and racism. I mean, the ultimate example is the Nazi ideology of a world-controlling Jewish elite, using that manufactured suspicion about a powerful, invisible enemy to justify mass murder. It just shows the lethal, real-world consequences of this stuff.
So we've seen the playbook. Real conspiracies fuel distrust. Historical patterns repeat, often targeting vulnerable groups. Now let's bring it all into the 21st century, where the main battleground for what's real is the internet.
The internet is, without a doubt, the most powerful communication tool we've ever invented. But that also means it spreads nonsense at the speed of light.
And the fundamental problem with the web is one of equivalence.
That's it, exactly. Because it's unregulated, because there's no universal filter for what's true, every piece of information kind of looks the same. A peer-reviewed scientific study that took 20 years to complete sits right next to a really emotional blog post from a flat earther, and to the average user, they look like they have the same weight.
And the structural problem is exactly what the climate denial movement used so expertly to delay action on a global crisis. The science is clear. Human activity is responsible for global warming.
But that scientific consensus wasn't met with counter-evidence. It was met with organized, manufactured doubt, funded primarily by the oil lobby. This corporate strategy is one of the most cynical and damaging true conspiracies of the last 50 years.
The Exxon strategy is just a stunning example. We have to detail this contradiction.
It is jaw-dropping. Exxon, starting way back in 1978, invested millions in their own internal climate research. And by the late 80s, their own scientists had concluded with their own data that CO2 emissions heat the climate and the consequences would be severe. They knew.
Wait, so they knew internally, their own scientists had confirmed it. But then in 1996, their CEO, Lee Raymond, gives this huge public speech.
He stood up and said the exact opposite of what his company knew to be true. He claimed it wasn't scientifically proven that humans could influence the climate. He successfully created this illusion of a scientific debate where, in reality, there wasn't one.
So it wasn't about convincing people global warming was a hoax. It was about injecting just enough uncertainty to paralyze any political action.
That was the goal, to delay. They spread doubt about their own findings just to give politicians an out. The message was, well, since it's not 100% certain, there's no reason to take drastic action now. They turned a settled fact into a belief system, and they succeeded in delaying action for decades.
And that campaign brings us back to maybe the most critical distinction in this whole deep dive, the difference between scientific doubt and conspiracy theory doubt.
They both start with the same engine, right? Doubt, skepticism, but they use it in completely different ways.
Yeah.
The conspiracy theorist sees doubt as a state of mind. They think they're being critical thinkers just by questioning everything. Questioning is the end goal. It's a stance.
But for science, doubt is a method.
It's a rigorous method. Science is a competition of hypotheses. You doubt the current answer, you propose a new one, and then, this is the most crucial part, you test it. You run an experiment. And the experiment, which is judged only by the laws of nature, decides which idea is true. It's a process designed to get closer to reality.
And just like the laser experiment for the flat Earth, there's a simple, undeniable experiment that proves the greenhouse effect. The very thing climate skeptics deny.
This demonstration is so important. You use a simple heat lamp to simulate the sun's energy. You shine it into a sealed canister, which is like our atmosphere.
And if it's just normal air in there, the temperature stabilizes. What happens when you add CO2?
When you add CO2, which you can make easily with baking soda and citric acid, the temperature inside that canister goes up. Demonstrably, quickly. The heat source hasn't changed, but the atmosphere is now trapping much more heat.
The physical demonstration of the core principle.
It is. And the tragedy is that the climate deniers, funded by corporate interests and fueled by this culture of distrust, they prevented the world from acting. Questioning is good, but you have to eventually accept that science has robust, repeatable answers to those questions. Ignoring them has consequences.
Wow. We have covered so much ground here, from, manipulated photos and the physics of a flat Earth, all the way through real CIA secrets like Operation Sea Spray, and up to the profitable scam of these organite columns.
I think the key takeaway for you, for the listener, has to be the importance of radical differentiation. You have to be able to distinguish between the true, verified secrets, the real conspiracies where powerful groups hide things, and these fabricated narratives that are just designed to manipulate you, drain your wallet, or paralyze action.
And the path forward, it really requires constant effort. It's about prevention, checking sources, and understanding the psychology of these groups. Recognizing that emotional protective bubble that makes it so hard to have a rational conversation when someone's inside.
And the battle for reality is really a battle of speed and trust. The source material notes something pretty sobering, though. Even when the science is perfectly clear, people may still fail to draw the right conclusions. The climate crisis is proof of that.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to think about. In a world where the speed of communication, the speed of a viral emotional post, is exponentially faster than the time it takes to do careful scientific verification, what is your personal responsibility in all of this?
What is your ethical role when you decide what to share, what to amplify, knowing that fear and emotion can so easily bypass rational thought and trigger these dangerous patterns? We are, right now, in the middle of a messy, ongoing process of trying to define the boundaries between truth, healthy skepticism, and engineered destabilization. And that process, scientifically speaking, will probably never be finished.